Have you been destroying my property? Uh-oh.
She won.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay.
This is case number 13-8320, the people versus Bob Bashara. Appearance for the record.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. John Voitala for the people.
This Lindsay on behalf of People State of Michigan.
Ronald Ambrose appearing on behalf of Mr. Bashara.
Mr. Muscat,
Good afternoon, Judge Patrick Muscat on behalf of the people.
we are honored to have Mr. Muscat here today. He is a deputy chief who is consented to come down and assist the prosecution in this matter. Thank you, Deputy Chief Muscat.
Move to strike, Judge.
Okay, very good. Okay, Mr. Bashara, finish yourself together. We'll be ready. Yeah. Did you? Chief?
No, they just took it off.
Oh, we moved it to.
Oh, okay.
So they had to drive by.
Okay.
So we were blocking each other's side.
Okay, just share it. All right, very good. You still go. Take the stand, Mr. Bashara. Now, he can turn around and look at this stuff. Is there something he can look at, like?
Unfortunately, some transcripts are not loaded up, or they could not be loaded up, but we do have ample copies for everyone.
No, what I'm saying, do you have a projector that we can view without him turning around? Yes, turn around. Do you know, like a...
Oh, no, we don't have one of those.
Not right now, Judge. I'd have to go set something up. I don't know if I can do that in a short period of time.
Is that a possibility? It's easier. Is it easier for you all to do that? You know, we have the screen. There's a screen like a laptop, and everything comes up on the laptop.
I'd have to get a split. Sorry to interrupt you, Judge. I'd have to get a splitter and run some cords, and that would probably take some time to do that.
Oh, okay. So that means we'd have to adjourn this hearing? Oh, we don't. Okay, go ahead.
Judge, before we get started, could you instruct the defendant to answer the questions directly? In the words of a Native American proverb, it does not require many words to speak the truth. So if I
Madam,
No,
there's some questions that he cannot answer in a yes or no form.
but the ones that he can answer yes or no, could you instruct him?
I will make every attempt.
Pull the microphone close to your mouth. Let me explain what this is. Pull it up.
I will make every attempt to do so, yes, Your Honor.
Anyway, my point is to you, Mr. Ambrose will have an opportunity to go over...
I don't want it in front of my face.
No, I have to hear you.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me now?
Okay, very good.
Okay.
So what will happen is Mr. Ambrose will have an opportunity, that's called redirect.
Yes.
And that is to allow you to give it additional information as you see fit regarding certain questions that were asked. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So what we need for you to do, if you can, answer Ms. Lindsay's questions with yes or no, but if you can't, just make a great attempt. But Mr. Ambrose will have a full opportunity to follow up once we are completed with her examination.
I will do my very best, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. You may proceed.
You are here at this hearing because you are unsatisfied with certain aspects of the representation of Mike McCarthy and Lillian Diallo. Is that correct?
Yes or no?
Both.
No, he's...
Yes and no. I'm here for that reason and for other reasons as well. So,
Okay,
yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
but you understand the purpose of this hearing is to deal with your satisfaction or dissatisfaction with your attorneys. Is that correct?
No, it's not 100% correct at all. It's to do with the dissatisfaction of my attorneys and other issues.
Be quiet.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand?
Wait, be quiet.
Okay.
Mr. Tabato, did you call him as a witness? Steve Tabato?
At trial, yes.
Are you calling him as a witness today?
No, he's a spectator. He's not a
Okay.
witness, period. He's a spectator at this point.
Okay. How about the defense?
I didn't call him, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. The motion that your attorney filed is a motion for new trial based on ineffective assistance to counsel, correct? That is the motion he filed, correct?
There are other parts of that motion. Yes, that and other parts as well.
Okay, well, your attorney can get to those other parts.
Okay.
Now, as it relates to that, Did you have a discussion with Mr. McCarthy when he was preparing your closing argument about your chances for acquittal?
We talked throughout the whole...
Is that a yes or a no? I'm asking you specifically, listen to the question.
Okay, I'm sorry. Repeat the question
The
then.
question is, did you have a discussion with Mr. McCarthy when he was preparing his closing argument about your chances of acquittal in this case? Did you have a discussion with him about that?
Yes.
Okay. And did you indicate to Mr. McCarthy that if you were acquitted, you would retain his services to make a motion to withdraw your guilty plea?
No.
You never told him that?
I don't recall...
Guilty plea in what matter?
In the solicitation case, you
No.
never indicated to Mr. McCarthy that if he was acquitted,
If he was acquitted.
Of the case of the murder of Jane
You said that
Bashara,
if he was acquitted.
that if the defendant, if you, Mr. Bashara, were acquitted in the murder of your wife, that you were
I
going
understood
to...
the question. The answer is no. I never had that conversation.
You're saying you never had that conversation at all with Mr. McCarthy.
That's correct.
Now,
To the best of my recollection, I did not have that conversation.
Okay,
Yes.
to the best of your recollection. Now, you weren't confused during that point in time, were you?
I've been confused through this whole thing, Miss Lindsay, yes.
Okay, so you could have been confused and just forgot that conversation. Is that what you're telling
No,
us?
I'm telling you that I don't recall that conversation.
Okay. Now, one of the things you indicated on the stand yesterday that you wanted to call J.D. Gifford, the private attorney. Is that correct, that you had when Mr. Grimm was on the case?
Yes.
And you indicated that you relayed that information to Mr. Diallo or Mr. McCarthy.
Absolutely. Numerous times.
Okay. Because you believed that Mr. and to make public statements as it related to the case. Is that correct?
There was no case at that point.
Well, the investigation.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So you knew you had retained him to work on the investigation and to make certain public statements on your behalf. Is that correct?
I did not give him permission to make any public statements, no.
Okay, but he was your attorney. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you understand under the law that if a person is your attorney, things that they say are attributable to you, correct? Do you understand that now?
I understand it now. I didn't understand it at the time.
Okay, so wait a minute, hold on for a minute. Didn't you testify yesterday that it was, or have you ever, or was it, strike that, that it was Mr. Grimm's desire to, that he encouraged you to speak to the media?
He was the one that told me to do it. She asked me, was I aware of what he was doing? I wasn't aware of what Mr. Grimm was doing on his own personal interviews.
Okay.
But were you aware that Mr. Grimm, or did Mr. Grimm set some of those interviews up for you to talk to the media?
Yes, he did.
And in fact,
And he advised
wait,
me to...
hold on.
I'm sorry?
Wasn't there one interview where you and Mr. Grimm did it together? Did you ever just talk with Mr. Grimm?
I don't recall that we did
Okay,
it together,
good.
no.
Okay, go ahead.
But at any rate, you would hear when he would make public statements. Is that correct?
I was where?
You were aware that he was making public statements?
After the statements were made, I heard them on the news, yeah.
Okay, and if you were dissatisfied with the statements he was making, you could have in fact fired him, is that correct, at that point in time, correct?
I could have, yes.
But you kept him on, is that correct?
I did.
Okay, well, I'm going to hand you a report from February 23rd, 2012, which relates to Mr. Grimm and J.D. Gifford
All right.
Report by whom?
In the media.
Read it
Your
to
Honor,
yourself silently.
I don't know what the relevancy of this is.
The
Why don't
relevance,
you let her see what it is? What is the relevance?
he indicated that February 23rd, 2012, which relates to Mr. Grimm and J.D. Gifford
All right.
Report by whom?
in the media.
Read it
Your
to
Honor,
yourself out.
I don't know what the relevancy of this is.
The
Why don't
relevance,
you let her see what it is? What is the relevance?
he indicated that he thought that Mr. Gifford, the reason why he wanted Mr. Gifford to come in and testify is because he felt Mr. Gifford had information helpful to his case.
Very good, I'll allow it.
Do you see the first paragraph that's highlighted in that article?
Yes,
Okay. And have you had a opportunity to read that?
the first one, yes, I have.
Okay. And Mr. Grimm is representing at that time that you had a new person of interest in the case. Is that correct?
That's what he's saying, yes.
Okay. And Mr. Gifford is the person who supposedly knows about this new person of interest. Is that correct?
I don't know what Mr. Grimm and Mr. Gifford came up with. I know Mr. Grimm said there was a person of interest. I don't know what Mr. Gifford's involvement was.
Okay. Now,
I can't speak to that.
I would assume that you would be very interested in the information they are uncovering about the death of your Jane, correct?
Absolutely.
So you didn't ask them, this new person of interest, could you tell me who this person is?
We talked after
Okay, thank you. So who was this new person of interest?
at the, you have to give me a time frame.
At the time frame of this article, February 23rd,
This was
2012.
Paul Monroe's conversation about Charles Wilson and April Montgomery.
Okay, thank you. And so the jury heard that already, didn't they?
Counsel, that's inappropriate.
Okay, well, okay. Now,
Your Honor,
Wait.
may I have a 30-second consult with my attorney?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The concern of my client is that if a new trial is ordered, Steve Tabatato is a witness in the case previously. I would assume that he'd be called in another trial. So,
You want us to question?
yes.
that's inappropriate. There's no new trial. The public has a right to be in the courtroom. He has a right to be in the courtroom. The mother of the victim was in the courtroom yesterday. She has, if there's a new trial, she would be called as a witness. They didn't make that motion yesterday. He just doesn't want Mr. Tabatato in the courtroom. That's all that's about. And we cannot be using his legal grudges against people, to put people out the courtroom. If that was the case, yesterday he would have moved to sequester all family members that were here of the victim. He did not.
I'll do that now, Your Honor. I'll move to sequester all family members as well as Mr. Tabatato or whoever else would be a witness.
I am concerned that if there is any questioning regarding Mr. Tabatato, that you would alert the court at that time, if there is, because there is an appearance that there's a potential that he then could learn some of this information. So I'm going to ask you, if he stays in here, there cannot be any discussion about his potential testimony or what happened with him.
Okay, well, if I do, I'll ask Mr. Tabatato to leave during those portions of time.
He has the right to say.
Thank you.
You may speak, Counsel.
Now, the next place highlighted in yellow do you see the paragraph where it says we have received information that has pointed us in a different direction? You see that?
Yes, I
Third
do.
paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
So at least on February 23rd, your investigator, Mr. Gifford, and your attorney who is speaking is saying that there's something that's taking your investigation in a different direction. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this time frame when this is being done is a time frame that Joe Gintz has been released. Is that correct?
Yes, on the 23rd, I think he hasn't been arrested yet. That's correct.
Okay. So before the police formally arrested Joe Gintz, he was in custody and they released him.
I didn't hear the rest of that question.
Joe Gintz was in custody and he was released, correct? Remember that?
I do.
Okay. So while Joe Gintz is out, your investigative team is now saying...
You got to stop that. Mr. Photographer. They're clicking. Okay, can you put a little something on there? All right, please, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And specifically, Mr. Gifford, can we go down to the paragraph that's bracketed after conducting exhaustive interviews with a number of people? Could you read that?
Yes.
Mr. Gifford and Mr. Grimm are saying at this time, while Mr. Gintz is out, not in custody, after conducting exhaustive interviews with a number of people, the defense team has decided that despite the confession, Gintz wasn't the killer. Correct?
I would disagree with that statement, but I will tell you that
Sir,
I don't know about it. I'm
Do you
sorry.
see that on the paper?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, that's fine.
and that's what your attorney and the investigator was representing at that point in time, correct?
Yes.
And you didn't fire them, is that correct?
Yes, I did not fire them.
Okay. So, and you were paying for a separate investigation, is that correct?
Pardon me?
You were paying for a separate investigation, is that correct?
I don't understand the question. I hired Mr. Grimm and he hired Mr. Gifford, so I don't know separate beyond that.
Could you look at the bottom, the last bracketed paragraph?
Well, I was paying the two.
Okay. Does it say, or does Mr. Grimm
Your Honor,
represent?
I'm going to object to
Why
this.
don't you let her ask the question before you object? Sit down. Go ahead, Ms. Lindsay.
Does it not say in the article, Grimm, a former federal and county prosecutor, said Bob Bashara is paying for a separate investigation because he wants to know what happened?
I object,
Does he
Your
say
Honor.
that?
Okay.
It's an article in a paper that it's not a statement from my client.
Well, what it's not, but what she's indicating, and I think what her position is that it's attributable to Mr. Bashir. At least he had knowledge of it because that was his lawyer.
That's correct. In addition to, it goes to Mr. Gifford. He said, Mr. Gifford, this testimony was needed to help him, so we want to explore.
I'll allow for
Thank
that
you.
for that purpose.
So what was the question?
Did Mr. Grimm indicate that you were paying for a separate investigation?
He indicated these are assumedly his words.
Okay, and
Okay.
you were aware what he was saying, is that correct?
No, I was not.
So you say you never knew he said that?
I have not seen this until today. That's
Okay.
correct.
Now, did you tell your children about a separate investigation that you were having Mr. Grimm and the federal investigator and his investigators conduct?
Okay.
Did you tell your children?
Listen,
I'm
just
tr-
listen.
I'm trying, she stumbled. I'm trying to understand what she's saying.
Did you tell your children,
Yes.
or you told your children, correct, that you had Mr. Grimm and an investigator conducting a private investigation? You told your son and your daughter that,
Yes,
correct?
I did.
So even if you didn't know Mr. Grimm said it in the paper, that was true, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. And you also told your children that the results of that investigation would be turned over to the police, correct?
Correct.
The results of that investigation were never turned over to the police, is that correct?
I don't know that.
Oh, okay. I would assume, once again, you want the person who killed your wife caught and brought to justice.
Absolutely.
So you're saying you didn't follow up and say, Mr. Grimm, Mr. Investigator, please turn over that information you found to the police so I can have some justice? You're saying you didn't do that?
Their investigation at this point wasn't
Sir,
complete.
did you...
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, well, let's look at what Mr. Grimm represented on February 23rd, 2012.
My
Read
flipping the
last...
page?
Yep, flip
Okay.
the page.
Counsel, you're going to have to change the form. Was he aware? Because I do agree with Mr. Ambrose. It is, I mean, it's hearsay, and it makes it more difficult. So let's rephrase the question.
Were you aware? Read the paragraph to yourself, first of all.
The one that's encircled?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Were you aware that Grimm said that Bob Bashara will cooperate with the police in any way possible in order to find who killed his wife? Were you aware he said that?
No, I was not aware.
But that was the truth, correct?
I'm sorry, I
But
didn't hear.
that was the truth, correct?
It is the truth.
Okay. The next part he said was, he said information the retired FBI agent, he said the information the retired FBI agent on the new person of interest may be turned over to the police by early next week. You were not aware that Mr. Grimm was supposed to that he said he was going to turn over some information by early next week?
No, I was not aware of that.
Okay. And I would assume that you were like checking up to see what was going on with the investigation because you were very interested.
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Or are you just
Yeah.
making a
Yeah.
statement?
That's a question.
I am absolutely concerned about what's going on. We discussed on a regular basis where they were. But on 2/23, they're still checking out information. They hadn't completed any solid investigation, nor had they met with the police according to what they would have told me. Because I'm sure he would have shared that with me had he done that.
Okay. But you're saying he never told you that we're going to be turning things over close to next week.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, did you in fact have a list of suspects that you wanted the police to look at?
Ma'am, you're walking back. I can't hear you without talking in the microphone.
Okay. Sorry, Judge. I'll repeat the question.
Please.
Did you tell the police, or did you give the police a list of suspects?
I did not give them a list. I gave them 3 names.
So you're saying you never at any time said you gave them a list, correct?
I don't remember giving them a list, no.
Okay. And the 3 names on the list were who?
Jason Popham, a tenant of mine by the name of Blue, and I don't remember his name at this point, but his name, we always called him Blue. I think his name was Daryl.
Daryl Bradford?
No, not Daryl Bradford. I don't know who Daryl Bradford is. I've never met Daryl Bradford. And I don't recall who the 3rd person was.
You recall the testimony of Public Safety Officer Hayes, is that correct? Do you remember Public Safety?
I do not recall the testimony, no.
Okay. Do you recall the testimony of the first officer who came to your home?
I'm sorry?
Do you recall the testimony of the first officer who came to your home?
I don't know who the first officer that came to my home was.
Do you recall talking to an officer who came to your home to take the missing person?
You're talking about on what day, and you're talking about on the 25th?
Please, counsel.
Okay. The first officer who came to your home in regard to the public, in regard to your wife not being home, you
You're
recall?
talking about on 1/25.
Can we just get a date?
Yes, on 125.
I recall calling Grosse Pointe Park Police, and they sent an officer over approximately 11 or 11:30 at night.
Okay, so that was actually 124 then. wasn't it?
Pardon?
That was actually 124, correct?
I don't know when it was. I don't recall. I thought it was, I maybe made the call at 11 or 11:30. I don't recall when he came.
Do you specifically recall speaking to him?
I do.
Do you specifically recall him being the person who brought up the name Jason Popham?
No.
Now, you indicated that you're saying you never said you provided a list. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
You're saying you never provided a list. Is that correct?
I do not recall writing down names on a piece of paper. No, I do not. I recall giving them to them verbally on 1/25 when they came over.
Are you talking at 125 when they came over? Are you saying you gave them to
Mr.
Captain Locke?
And Detective Olson, yes.
And Sergeant Hanson?
I talked mainly just to the 2. I don't think there was a 3rd in the room at that time.
So you're saying you gave them the list, or you told them the names?
I did tell them those names at that time.
Captain Locke and Detective Olson.
Olson of the Detroit Police Department.
Jason, what's his last name?
You're talking about the person I gave the name was
Right.
Jason Popham,
Popham.
P-O-P, I think it's H-A-M. He was a former tenant of mine.
And Blue.
And a guy named Blue. I'll think of his name before.
That's fine.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recall the testimony of Don Olson when he indicated you didn't give him any names?
No, I do not recall that.
Okay.
If he
And-
said that, that would be a lie.
Oh, that would be a lie?
Yes,
Well, do you
ma'am.
also recall doing a TV interview almost right away saying you had no clue who would want to do anything to you?
Absolutely.
Okay. But you did have a clue if you named Popham and this Blue or somebody else, correct?
No, they asked me, is there anyone that I knew that would possibly want to hurt you or cause any harm to you or your family? And I said, Jason Popham threatened me, and I had the voicemail saved on my phone, and I also talked about Blue saying he's going to get me because I didn't let him in. He burned my apartment up, and I wouldn't let him into the apartment to get his stuff. Well, the door was burned up. He could have walked in at any time.
But you re-rented to him, right?
I did.
Yeah.
No, I did not. I rented to his girlfriend.
But you were afraid he was going to do something to you, but you re-rented to his girlfriend, and he was living with his girlfriend, correct?
I did not know that that was his girlfriend at the time I rented to her, and I don't think he moved in at the same time. I think he moved in later as
But
member.
anyway, I don't want to
Okay.
hear about that.
Okay.
Right.
Now,
But anyway, wait a minute.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
you're indicating that at the time that you made the call to the public safety, you gave them the name Blue and Jason Popham.
At that time, I did not, no.
Okay, did you give it to Captain Locke on the 25th?
Yes, ma'am.
And to Detective Olson?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever tell them you had a voicemail and to listen to the voicemail?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
They did not ask to listen to it, but I told them I had it.
Wait a minute, so you're saying that when they came there for the purpose of telling you they found your wife?
Yes, ma'am.
And you then said to them, you know, is there two people that I think may have had something to do with it? And I got a voicemail on one of them, leaving threats, and they said they didn't want to listen to it?
Your Honor, they asked me who may have, do you know anyone that could want to
Okay.
cause harm? And I tried to think, and for a moment, and I thought, well, I have this one tenant who left a voicemail and threatened me.
Did you let the police officers listen to
They
it?
didn't ask for it. No,
Did
and
you volunteer to let them hear it?
I said, you're welcome to hear it. And they did not ask me to play it at that time.
Okay.
very good.
Well,
Okay.
first of all, this is after, I mean,
No, I don't need all that.
Okay.
That's my question.
all right, I answered did I answer it correctly?
You did.
Okay.
okay. Now, you had met with Mr. Grimm and gave him some preliminary information about your relationship with...
When?
Okay. Prior to February 3rd, you had met with Mr. Grimm and retained him as to be your attorney. Is that correct?
I don't recall what the date I retained him was. I do not
But would
recall.
that be fair to say it was around that time?
Prior to February 3rd? I thought it was after that, but it could have been,
Around February 3rd?
it could have been around, within a day or two either side, yes.
Okay. Well, certainly he wasn't making statements in the media before you retained him. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So let's talk about February. So if I had a media report that he's making statements on your behalf on February 3rd, you certainly would have had to retain him before that, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And when you retained him, you had some preliminary conversations with him about who Joseph Gentz was and your relationship with him. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did I hand you the article from February 3rd?
I don't know, let me see the date here.
Check it.
Yes, I have it.
Okay. Could you look to, and you told him the length of the relationship you had with Mr. Gentz, is that correct?
I told him, are you asking me to read this, or
No,
are you
I'm
asking me a
asking you,
question?
I'm asking you a question.
A question out there.
I'm sorry, what was the
Did
question?
you tell him how long you had known Mr. Gentz?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe I did.
Could you go to paragraph 2 that's bracketed? Could you-
The second bracketed one?
Yes, and could you read that to yourself?
Well, this is absolutely incorrect.
Okay, well, I'm getting ready to ask you
Okay.
some questions. Does Mr. Grimm indicate in this media report that Bob Bashara and Joe have known each other roughly 2 to 3 years?
He says that, but it's absolutely untrue.
And did you, at that point, fire him for making untrue statements in the media?
I didn't see this. I
Okay.
didn't know he said this.
So you weren't following what was going on in the media about the case? Is
No,
that-
I followed on the TV only. I didn't do a lot of
You
reading.
weren't aware of this, right?
I was
Okay.
not aware of that.
Okay.
Okay. And also, he said, recently, Grimm... What, okay,
Where?
okay, were you aware that in that same bracketed paragraph, he said Bashara and the handyman had a dispute over payment with the man alleging that Bashara still owed him money around a couple of $1,000s?
I was not aware of this statement.
Okay,
I may have told Mr. Grimm that I owed him money.
but you're not aware of this statement?
Oh, Mr. Gibbs.
Mr. Gins, yeah.
Okay.
I never paid him.
And did you tell him that the amount was a couple of $1,000s?
No, I did not.
Okay, so part of that statement is true, but the rest of it isn't, is that correct?
I never have seen this, so yes, it's correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, when did you pay Joe Gentz that check for $400? When did you pay him that check?
If memory serves me, I think it was on the 26th, that Thursday
The
Of
20.
what month?
of January
Okay.
of 2012.
So that would have been the day after your wife's body was found. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, could you go to the next bracketed section in that article and read it to yourself? And when you're finished, let me know.
Okay, I read it.
Okay. And does it indicate that you told Mr. Grimm that you wrote the check the day before your wife was murdered?
That's correct. Actually, it was 2 days before. I think he misstated this. I wrote it on that Sunday night.
Okay. So once again, the attorney is wrong. Correct. Is
And
that a yes?
based
Correct?
on what's reported here, yes.
Okay. One of the other people you said you told us yesterday that you told Lillian Diallo and Mr. McCarthy that you wanted them to call Dean Valente as a witness. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Dean Valente is a friend of yours. Is that correct?
He is a friend, yes.
And he's also an attorney. Is that correct?
He is an attorney?
He was not your criminal attorney. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, he was, or yes, he was not your criminal attorney.
Yes, he was not my criminal attorney.
Okay. And as a matter of fact, you indicated yesterday that he told you to listen to the aid and advice of Mr. Grimm, who was your criminal attorney. Is that correct?
Could you excuse me a second, please? I'm going to blow my nose. Sorry.
Okay.
If you could kindly repeat the question?
Yes. You indicated to us yesterday that Dean Valente told you to follow the aid and advice of your criminal attorney, Mr. David Grimm. Is that correct?
That's not 100% correct, no.
But part of it is.
Part of it is.
He told you to listen to him. But definitely he was not part of, Mr. Dean Valente was not part of your criminal defense team. Is that correct?
No, he was not.
Now, you actually were interviewed by the press in Mr. Grimm's office by Joe Swickard and Gina Damron. Is that correct?
I recall several interviews. I don't remember the date or who interviewed me now.
And do you recall that one of them may have been in February 2012?
That would be possible, yes.
Now, you indicated that, and to this day, Mr. Valente is a friend of yours. Is that correct?
Well, I haven't talked to him in a while. I mean, I actually called him the other day, but I mean, I think he is. He told me stay strong, so I assume he's still a friend, yes.
And to your knowledge today, as you sit here, he has not provided an affidavit to your attorney in support of your motion for new trial, correct?
To my knowledge, no.
You have it?
Are we done with these?
Wait,
I'm sorry.
hold on.
I had to check with Mr. Mescat for something. And when you, and Mr.
Counselor, are you done with the article? So you can retrieve them?
He can just leave him there, Judge.
You can just put them on the floor.
I just
he
put
did
him on the
already.
floor, yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, your friend Dean Valente, the one who has not supplied an affidavit to date to support your motion for new trial, when you spoke about him in phone calls to other people, did you call him DV?
Sometimes.
Okay. Because you knew people were listening to your phone calls, is that correct?
No, those are his initials.
Okay. You did not indicate to some people in phone calls, I know they're listening on my phone calls?
I may have, sure.
Okay, so then you knew people were listening to your phone calls, correct?
Because it says it right on the phone and on the recording. Yes, I knew that.
Well,
yes,
how
I
come
knew it.
how come you didn't answer that when I asked you the first time?
How come I what?
Move on.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So you indicated you called him DV in the phone call sometimes, correct?
Yes, I
Okay.
did.
And did you indicate to Mr. Falcinelli that DV had your writings?
Yes, I did.
And you indicated to Mr. Falcinelli that you wanted Mr. Falcinelli to have your writings. Is that correct?
I did.
Okay. So you wanted Dean Valente to turn your writings over to Mr. Falcinelli.
Where are we going with this?
Judge, I have a
Okay, all right.
okay? Okay. Now going on to the next witness you wanted called, Chief Hiller. Okay? You indicated that you wanted Chief Hiller called because you wanted the jury to know about the grudge he had against you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And one of the bases of the grudge that you claimed that Mr. Hiller had against you was his involvement in your criminal sexual conduct case. Is that correct?
One of them. And it wasn't, there was no case, it was an investigation.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
okay. The criminal sexual conduct investigation, correct? That was one of the reasons, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Hiller was one of the investigators. Chief Hiller wasn't a chief at that time, but he was a lieutenant at that time. Is that correct? During that
I
investigation?
don't remember his rank.
Okay. But he was one of the people who was an investigator, correct?
Yes.
And that investigation dealt with the allegations of you molesting your 5-year-old niece. Is that correct?
No.
It did not?
No, that's not, it wasn't molesting.
Okay.
What would you describe it as? Inappropriate touching?
That's what they alleged, yes.
Okay.
Inappropriate touching.
Inappropriate touching. Your niece had
I think
alleged...
there's a difference.
Okay. Your niece had alleged that you made her touch your penis. Is that correct?
I don't know what she alleged. I didn't hear anything from her. This,
Okay.
Okay. So you didn't hear those allegations.
I was asked a number of questions
Okay, wait a
to
minute.
which I responded.
If you indicated yesterday you took 2 polygraphs, correct?
I did take 2 polygraphs.
And you indicated you passed 2 polygraphs, correct?
Correct.
And they had to ask you, did you do specific things, correct?
Yes.
So did you assume that the specific questions they were asking you about were allegations that she had made?
They wanted to get information, and I answered the questions truthfully.
Yes. So did they ask you
At what time?
during the polygraph,
When? In this investigation?
in this investigation for the inappropriate touching of his 5-year-old, alleged inappropriate touching of his 5-year-old niece?
There's also a reference to polygraph, I thought, in the murder case.
Right, but we're only dealing right now with the inappropriate touching of his niece. Okay?
All right.
Okay?
What's, okay, go ahead.
Okay. Did they ask you, did you make her touch your penis?
During the one with the polygraph, which
I believe they did ask me that.
Okay. So you were aware, at least, that may have been a potential allegation that you had made her touch your penis. Is that correct?
Since no one told me what the allegations were, they asked me a number of questions. I don't recall what the allegations were. Inappropriate touching is what I was told.
Okay.
they didn't tell you specifically what it was?
No, they did not.
Okay.
Did they ask you about making your niece, or did they ask you a question about making your niece kiss your penis?
Pardon me?
Did they ask you about making your niece kiss
Your
your
Honor?
penis?
I have to object. I don't know where we're going with this.
I'm curious too.
We're going with this is he said Mr. McCarthy testified that one of the reasons why they did not want Hiller called is because they didn't want this whole area of the prior allegations and the grudge to come up as it relates to this criminal sexual conduct case. He was the one who got up and brought it up. Mr. Bashara brought it up. He talked about the polygraphs. We want the fact finders, whoever's reading this record, understand exactly why Mr. McCarthy and Mrs. Diallo did not want this area explored.
And Your Honor, my response tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. And this goes to the ineffective assistance of counsel issue, because Your Honor made an order on, I believe it was September 8th, saying that the polygraph and this issue wasn't going to be brought up at trial. So for Mr. McCarthy to be concerned about that area wasn't
Well, if you,
a sound,
okay,
wasn't a sound trial tactic.
What?
It was not a sound trial tactic to be concerned about this area, because Your Honor had already excluded it. It was not going to be part of the trial.
Irrespective of whether or not the court had excluded the result for the exam, there could have been an opportunity, if Mr. McCarthy wanted to discuss why there was an alleged motive without talking about the polygraph. So what you're, and it's Madam Prosecutor's position that the reason that they did not go into that because they didn't want the prior fact to hear all of this. No, but now Mr. Bashara is saying, no, you know, this is a motive as to why Chief Hiller put these false allegations against him. I'm going to allow it.
thank you.
All right, now get back to the question.
Okay. You were interviewed in relationship to this inappropriate touching by the Grosse Pointe Park Police Department, is that correct?
When, madam?
Back in 19...
Can we get the date, please?
Yes. Eight, 1/1995. You were in...
Go ahead.
Do you recall being interviewed when this allegation was made against you
Yes,
by the Grosse Pointe Park Police Department?
yes, I was interviewed by them, that's
And
correct.
do you recall the officers that interviewed you?
Yes,
Okay. Was one of those officers Hiller?
yes,
Okay. And when you spoke to Lieutenant Hiller, were you aware whether or not they were taking notes when you were talking with them?
I was not aware of what they were doing at the time.
Do you recall the subject matter that they talked to you about?
Yes,
Okay. Do you recall telling them that the children had seen you naked?
yes,
And did you recall telling them that the children had seen you naked during the jumping game you played with them?
I don't recall it, no, I do not recall that.
Okay. But you did play a jumping game with the children, is that correct?
We wrestled on our bed on a number of occasions, yes.
Okay. And do you recall telling them they've seen you naked, we play a jumping game, to think anything was sexual about that was perverse? Do you recall telling them that?
I don't recall that, no.
Okay. But that would adequately express your feelings, correct?
I'm sorry?
That would adequately express your feelings, correct? That anybody who would think that there was something perverse about the way you were playing with them in the jumping game was perverse, correct?
Absolutely. It wasn't a jumping game, it was like King of the Hill.
And what's that?
And I would get on the bed and put a cover over me, and the kids would jump on me and attack me, and I would throw them off the bed, and in a nice way, I'd let them down. We'd put pillows on the outside so when they fell, they didn't fall on the floor. But my daughter, my son, and Megan, we all did this at the same time together, while the girls were downstairs drinking and smoking pot.
Okay. The girl being your wife?
And her sister, yes.
Okay. And do you also recall telling the police that this might have happened the reason why you were naked is this might have happened when they ran in and unexpected and jumped on the bed when you were naked?
No.
You don't recall saying that?
I absolutely don't recall saying that. My comment to that about being naked is several times the kids walked in when I was changing and I was naked.
Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about when you said whether Joe Gentz had met Jane. Do you recall testifying about that yesterday?
Repeat the question, I'm sorry.
Do you recall testifying yesterday about Joe Gentz and when and if he met Jane?
Yes.
Okay. And you indicated there was never any formal introduction, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you indicated that she had brought out some iced tea, is that correct?
Lemonade, I think is what I said.
You brought us some lemonade.
They didn't bring, she didn't bring it to us. She set it on the porch, the barbecue porch, and we were in the back of the backyard 40 to 50 feet away.
Because you have a very lush backyard, yes, like you said yesterday, is that correct?
Yes.
And it was in the fall, correct?
Correct.
And I would assume there was a lot of foliage that you needed him to help you get up, is that correct?
We were pruning, yes.
Okay. But you told a different story to the media about how and when there was any contact at all between Jane and Mr. Gintz. Do you recall that?
No, I don't recall that.
Can I have exhibits 330A?
A is an apple.
Yes.
Did Joe ever meet Jane?
I don't know. I don't, not at that time, no.
When he was doing work in the backyard
No,
with Jane, no?
no, it was during the day. She was at work.
But in his most recent interview with Dateline, Bashara says the handyman did have a face-to-face encounter with Jane here on Middlesex.
He did some yard work out back. He had met Jane out in the back. And she brought us iced tea one day when we were cleaning up shrubbery and preparing the backyard for the winter.
Okay. So the first time you said she didn't meet him because she was at work.
That's correct.
And then you said she actually brought out some iced tea.
Well, there was several times.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
It was, well, yes.
Did you say that? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I did say that.
And did
Those are
you-
my words, yes.
And did you also make an account in the media where you said that Joe came over to your house only one time and that was in January?
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
Did you also say in the media that Joe had only come over to your house one time and then that was in January?
I don't recall saying that, no.
Can I have 333I, please?
Did Joe ever come to your house, Bob?
One time to do some work in the backyard.
When did he come to your house and do work in the backyard?
1st of January, first week of January.
Did Joe ever meet Jane?
I don't know. I don't, not at that time, no.
When he was doing work in the backyard with Jane, no?
No, it was during the day. She was at work.
Okay, so now you said he'd only come to your house one time. Those were your words, is that
That
correct?
is, and that's incorrect.
Okay, were you
Wait a minute, hold on. Your words were incorrect.
That's right.
Well, why did you say it?
I don't know. I have no clue why I would say that, because it's untrue.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Now, yesterday you also talked to us a little bit about when your interest in BDSM came about. Is that correct?
Pardon me?
When your interest in BDSM, when did it come about? You talked
Yes.
to us about yesterday. And you indicated that, what year was that roughly?
I don't recall the year. 2003, 2004 is when I started, maybe 2005.
Okay. And that was a result of a pop-up that you said you saw through a gambling, when you were online gambling. Is that-
Numerous pop-ups, yes.
Numerous pop-ups. And alt.com came up, is that correct?
I don't recall whether it was Alt or Column Me. A couple of the sites came up. Once you went to one, the others are referenced on them.
And that's what piqued your interest, is that correct?
Yes, it did.
You had some writings, is that correct?
I had what?
Writings that you wanted, that you just testified that you wanted Dean Valente to give to Mr. Falcinelli, is that correct?
Yes,
And these were writings that you had done when you were in the county jail, correct?
correct.
And you indicated to Mr. Falcinelli that these were writings about your early childhood, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you recall in those writings where you saying that you had your first BDSM experience when you were in elementary school?
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
Do you recall saying in your writings that you had your first BDSM experience in elementary school?
I may have mentioned that I had one minor exposure to it. But I didn't know it was BDSM at the time,
Well, what makes you believe it was BDSM now?
because I know what it's about now.
Okay.
And when I,
Take a look at the document.
okay?
Can you show it to him? 'Cause this is a little-
I have the pages.
Okay. So
what do you call, sticky notes on them. And the pages are off, also at the top have
All right, so
numbers.
what page am I looking at?
Okay, I'm getting there, sir. Page, it says on it, page 8, 9 on the top.
Do you see that, sir?
I have it
I see
highlighted.
page 9. Do you want 8 or 9?
It says on there 8, 9, so,
I have page 8 and PG 9. It's page 9.
PG 9, okay, I couldn't read your writing.
Just read it.
Okay, read it to you, is something highlighted on the bottom? Sir, is something
Yes,
highlighted?
there is.
Okay, read it to yourself.
Yes.
Okay, could you read that to the court, to the judge?
At my house, we had a third-floor maid's room with a large room, a bathroom, and an attic storage area. One time, we were up there, I found a magazine about rope bondage. Little did I know, this is still,
This would instill,
this would instill latent
curiosity.
curiosity. I can't even read my own writing. My eyes aren't good. About
About a something lifestyle.
a lifestyle.
Bill and I read it often. Who was Bill?
Elementary school friend of mine.
Okay. And what happened between you and Bill after you found this magazine?
Bill and I read it often. I can't read the bottom.
Why don't you read it?
And he asked.
Okay.
And he asked.
Be quiet now.
Okay, okay. Now we're on page 10. I found some clothesline and something pieces of picture. He stripped. I guess Bill stripped. We stripped to our underwear. He laid on the back on the bench and I bound him tight. We did that for an hour and laughed at our newfound adventure. We did this only once more, and from that point on drifted apart as friends. I enjoyed binding him and had thoughts of doing that to the girls that I knew.
Did you say that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so when Mr. Ambrose asked you yesterday about when your BDSM interest began, you did not tell us the truth about when that began.
Yes,
Correct.
it did. This is an isolated incident that happened one time that I, quite frankly, had forgotten. My BDSM interests in the lifestyle started in 2003 and 2004. So
Okay.
to you to say that 30 years or 40 years prior, when I was 8 or 9 or 10 years old, that's when it started, no.
But I think the question is, why did you indicate in your writing in the Wayne County Jail that that's when it piqued your interest in the writing?
It didn't peak it.
Exposed the
It
latent
exposed it to me, yeah.
Okay, so then it wasn't just offline. It was back when you and Bill were tying each other up.
Well, if you want to make that leap, Your Honor, yes.
I'm asking you, why'd you put it down there in the writing?
Because it's true.
Okay.
That at that point, it interests me, but I didn't pursue it until 2003 or 2004.
Very good.
Okay.
I think the distinction is noted for the
Okay,
record.
okay, thank you. If I can just have a minute, Your Honor. Now, do you talk about somebody named, go to page 28. Actually, skip 28. Go to page 30.
28 or 30?
30, please, sir.
Okay. Okay.
That's okay. That in 30 you're starting talking about your marijuana use. Is that correct? Okay. Well, it's relating to what he said to the police during his statement, but I'm moving on. I'm moving on. Okay, thank you. Now, let's talk a little bit about the keys, and you're returning to the house for the keys, okay?
Yes.
Okay, you spoke to the police basically on 124. The first call comes in at 12:36 p.m. At that point, when you first talked to the police, you didn't give your timeline and say you came back.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
you. Did not. The first time you talked to the police, you did not say you came back to your house for keys. Is that correct?
That's correct. I did not recall that I did that.
Okay, so the answer to that question is you did not, correct?
I did not.
Okay. And when you spoke to them at 1:13 p.m., that's your second call to the police. Is that correct?
What day are we on now?
124. The day when
I did not speak to the police on 124.
You didn't have a call, a dispatch call at 11:13
Oh, I thought you meant face-to-face. You're saying a phone call?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead.
In the dispatch phone call, when you called the police to talk about Jane not being home,
Correct.
you told them that you were at your rental properties, correct?
I was at the rental property. That's correct.
But you did not tell them you went back for the keys. Is that correct?
That's correct.
At 11:33, you spoke to the police again.
And this is on the phone.
On the phone.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And once again, you didn't say you came back to the house.
That's correct.
And by this time, are Debbie Breen and Patty Matthews at the house? Is that correct? Your house on Middlesex?
My mother and Debbie Breen. I'm not sure if Patty was there. I don't recall everyone who was there.
Okay. But at any point, at any rate, Debbie Breen was there. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you spoke to Debbie Breen, correct?
Yes.
And you told Debbie Breen where you had been. Is that correct?
I told Debbie Breen what?
Where you had been. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you did not tell her that you had come back for the keys,
That's
correct?
correct.
Now, roughly at 11:38, Public Safety Officer Hayes comes to Middlesex. Is that correct?
Okay, if you say so.
Okay. You spoke to him at your house. Is that correct?
Now let me ask you a question.
No.
Well, because she's got me confused now, because earlier I said he came at 11:30, and she said, no, it wasn't until 1:32.
Okay,
Now she's saying 11:30.
May I?
Yes.
Just say that you don't understand the question.
Repeat the question,
Okay.
please.
Very good.
The first police officer who actually came to your house,
Yes.
okay, irrespective of what time it was, the first physical presence you had in your house to talk about Jane being missing, you remember talking to a male officer?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And when you talked to that male officer, you gave him his whereabouts, correct? You gave them your whereabouts. Is that correct?
I don't recall everything I said to him. If he asked me, I probably told him, yes.
Okay. And certainly, since you said you didn't remember at this point, you did not tell him you had came back to Middlesex. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, in the morning when Officer Olson, Captain Locke came to your house,
Yes.
at that point in time, you did not tell them you had been back to the house for keys. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, all these encounters, especially your first phone call to the police department, only a couple of hours had passed since you had been at the Hard Luck and came back home, correct?
That's correct.
Your memory a couple of hours from the event, you did not remember you had come back to get keys, correct?
That's correct. I did not recall that. I was more focused on where my wife was.
Okay, so you didn't recall that. Okay, so when you spoke to the police on 126, you, in fact, gave a statement. Is that correct?
On 126, I did, yes.
And incidentally, on 126, before you went and gave your statement to the police, you, in fact, had delivered a check to Joseph Gentz. Is that correct? Delivered a check to St. Vincent de Paul where Joseph Gentz worked. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that is the day after your wife had been murdered. Is that the day after your wife's body had been found? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at that point in time, I'm assuming you're grieving. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And a lot of things are going on. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your children are coming back, or your children are trying to come back. Family is coming in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But you took the time to write a check and deliver it to Joseph Gentz. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct.
You didn't take the time to do that.
No, I didn't. I wrote the check on Sunday prior to that. It was in my car. I went to gas my car up on the 26th. I noticed the check in my visor. St. Vincent de Paul was a block and a half away, and I dropped the check off to him because that weekend prior, Mr. Gentz had told me he wanted to come over to the house. He wanted to, he needed this money. He had this custody hearing, and he was...
Sir, my question was very simple.
Well,
you went over there and you took the time, however much or little time, to deliver the check. You did it, correct?
I did, yes.
Okay. Now, could you go to page 23 of the statement you gave to the police? When you get there, read the page to yourself, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Okay.
At that point in time, you're talking about your whereabouts. Is that correct?
Right.
And you say, absolutely, I know you got to verify my time and where I've been. I understand that. Believe me, I've had a number of attorney friends tell me what you're going to say and going to ask and what I should look forward to. Is that what you say at that point in time?
Yes.
And you knew at that point in time the police needed you to verify where you had been. Is that
Yes.
correct? And you did not at that point in time tell them I had went back to Middlesex, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you did not tell them, but you told them you had been at the Hard Luck, correct?
I told them where I was.
You told them you had been at the Hard Luck, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, in your mind, you said you know you have to verify where you've been. Is that correct?
Correct.
You did not say at that point in time, you know what, officers, I know I have to verify where I've been. I know the Hard Luck has surveillance. You go to the Hard Luck and you can get the surveillance. You can verify where I've been. You did not say that, did you?
Absolutely I did. Not in this interview.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all we're talking about right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. You asked me, did I tell the officers that? I did the day before.
We're talking about this. And when did you tell them that the day before?
On the 25th, I told Captain Locke and Detective Olson.
Okay.
That I was working behind the Hard Luck Lounge in Dillon's, and that Dillon's had security cameras.
Okay.
At that point, that's when I told them.
If that's what you say. Now, okay. Now,
Thank you.
there were some gaps in your timeline. Is that true? For that day, you had gaps.
What day are we talking about?
The day that your wife was murdered. The day we're talking about where you felt you had to verify.
You're talking about 1/24/12?
Correct.
Gaps? I don't know what you mean by gaps.
That you could not account for some of the time in your day.
No, I accounted for every minute of my day.
Okay. Do you recall on David Grimm giving a press conference basically on the 3rd of February 2012?
Do I recall that? No.
Yeah. Weren't you in his office?
I don't know. I don't recall
Was there ever an occasion when you were in David Grimm's office when he was giving a press conference?
that I was in the same room. No.
I'm not talking about it. I'm talking about when you were in his office while he was off doing a press conference.
I don't recall when David Grimm did press conferences, and it was in the office, and he went in another room and did a press conference. I don't recall that I was there or that I recall that, no.
All right.
Okay. Could you play it?
The only thing that I have had time to do at this point in time is to start putting together a chronology of where he was and what he was doing on the day of her murder. And can we account, I believe, at this point in time for every minute? Absolutely not. Can we account, I think, for enough time that would have made it impossible to participate in that terrible tragedy? I think we have, and you'll see that, and I hope it doesn't come, but you'll see that in the courtroom.
Okay. So you had your first meeting with Mr. Grimm, and you told him about your timeline. Is that correct?
Yes.
And based on what he said, you couldn't account for all your time, correct?
Those are his words, not mine.
I know. And once again, are you saying you're unaware he went on TV and said this?
Correct.
Okay. Did any friends or family members call you up and tell you about this?
About this interview?
Yes.
I don't recall.
Okay. And you went into quite some detail when you spoke to the police about your timeline. Is that correct? When you were at the Hard Luck, correct?
I was not just at the Hard Luck, I was behind the whole building, but I tried to give him as much detail as I recalled at the time, yes.
Okay. And you even told them that a point of time that Jane Bashara called you while you were at the Hard Luck. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you
I was at the Hard Luck, yes.
And you indicated it was around 4:40. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you indicated that you could not take her call because something was in your hands. Is that correct?
I didn't take her call. I called her back.
Right. My question to you is, did you indicate that you couldn't take her call because something was in your hands or something to that effect, correct?
To that effect, yes.
But in actuality, you were on a call with Rachel Gillette. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So your wife is calling you, and you could not put Rachel on hold to take that call, correct?
I don't know if I looked to see if it was my wife calling me.
Okay.
I saw a call. I heard a call come, click coming in, but I didn't look at the caller ID.
Okay.
I was just kept talking.
You just kept talking to Rachel.
And I called her back.
Okay.
Jane back after I was done with talking to Rachel. That's correct.
Now, did you indicate to the police, page 23 again, that you were working outside mostly because it was cold?
Page 23.
Yep. Midway down the page.
Nothing's highlighted, so I don't know what part.
Halfway down the page.
Halfway down.
Where's your first word correct?
Yes, I was working outside.
So you were working mostly outside because it was cold, correct?
That's correct.
And you indicated that you kept going back and forth inside the building to warm up.
Twice, yes.
Now, you met with a special agent O'Riordan on the 27th, is that correct?
Correct.
And you did not tell him that you went back to get your keys, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, you had talked to your family about where you were, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you also talked to Debbie, do you know Roxanne Flaxa?
I'm sorry?
Roxanne Flax.
I know who she is, yes.
Okay. Did she come up to the house that night?
I'm quite sure. There were so many people over. I'm quite sure she was there, but I don't recall.
Okay.
You're talking about on the 24th or 25th?
Right now I'm talking about the 24th. On the 24th were Debbie Breen and Roxanne Flaxa and your mother at the house.
Well, earlier you said Patty Matthews, but I don't recall.
I'm asking you now about this.
I don't recall if Roxanne was one of the ones over. I would imagine she was across the street, and I would imagine she would
So
come
you don't
over.
remember?
I don't recall.
Thank you. So at least you recall not telling Breen that you had been back for keys, correct?
I'm sorry, telling
At
who?
least you recall that you did not tell Debbie Breen you had went back for keys,
I don't
correct?
recall telling her that, no.
Your mother was there, is that correct?
That's correct.
You did not tell your mother that you had come back for keys, correct?
That's correct.
You talked to Jessica and Robert, is that correct?
At what day, what time?
At any point in time, when you told them, when you first talked to them, did you tell them you went back for keys?
When I first talked to them, I had to inform them terribly.
When you first talked about the keys, sir, when you first talked about your timeline for that day, when you first
Give me a
told them...
minute, please.
Wait a minute, let's take a break. Let's take a 15-minute recess. Okay, 15-minute recess.